Here this time bringing you a video about Greedfall 2, which just recently launched into early access, today at the time of this video ideally, but right away if I sound a little bit different it is because I was sick recently. Apologies there in advance. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. So, Greedfall 2 is from developer Spiders, whose previous biggest title was in fact Greedfall, and a lot of people were clamoring for a little more of it, which is what we're getting with Greedfall 2, though it makes some important changes from that initial formula that I think are definitely worth talking about and discussing. So here we are. Right away though, let's talk about how this thing is running, though a brief mention for the fact that as an early access title that inherently means it is not finished, and so everything we discuss here in theory is subject to change and hopefully improvement. Now on the technical side of things, unfortunately I just could not get this game to stop crashing on me. I played it for a couple of hours and it crashed probably 10 plus times in that time frame, which the game kept trying to tell me was a graphic driver problem, but I always keep those updated as I review games, so I know that wasn't the issue. But moving on a little bit, we then start the game by making our own character. Character creation is very limited at the moment. I sincerely hope they actually ramp this up and add a whole host of different options, because right now it's basically just a handful of very basic presets that weren't all that interesting. But no matter what character you make, you play as a native of the island of Tier 4D, the location of the original game. However, this time, instead of playing one of the people from the main continent, we're playing as a native, who after a short introduction to the game eventually gets shipped off to the mainland for reasons that are not yet clear, but probably have something to do with the Malachor plague, which is currently ravaging the main continent, which is what they are doing in Tier 4D, looking for a cure to begin with. Now, all of this story, though, takes place about 3 years before the original, so while we start the game looking for answers to local problems and how recent settling has messed with the land in terms of its animals and water supply, etc., we know where the story of Tier 4D ultimately winds up via the original game, so it'll be curious to me over the course of the actual launch of this one to see where they actually take this story and how it ties into the first one, which is probably what we're doing on the main continent specifically rather than being on the island of Tier 4D. Now in any event, right as this game is launching into early access, there is only a portion of the story available, not the full thing, and with later updates via a roadmap they've released, they plan on releasing, of course, new companions, new companion quests, extending that main story, adding a new region, hub area, some skill trees, crafting being fleshed out, etc. Though in all of that, I do hope they also clean up the UI while they are at it, because right now it is extremely bare bones. But probably the biggest breakaway from the original game is the changes to progression and combat. So progression-wise, we'll be leveling up, of course, by completing quests, fighting enemies. When we level up, we're either gaining attributes, skills, or talents. Talents seem to be the rarest one. I only seem to get one like every 4 or 5 levels, whereas you get attributes every levels and skills every other level. But those skills are made up of several different skill trees, each with their own sort of focus that can be mixed and matched as you please to sort of create your own class with your own skills to activate. Now, one thing that does kind of bother me in early access quite a bit is that as of right now, there's no way to like assign or prepare your characters for combat when you are outside of combat, which is what you're going to want in a real-time with pause tactical game, because once we have those progression systems in place, we then have to talk about combat. So combat, rather than the more action-oriented slant that the original had, is instead going for something akin to Dragon Age Origins here, where it's a real-time with pause system, we're controlling our entire party and issuing them commands based on things like action points, and of course skills they've learned. This is where the hotbar will actually be available to be customized, which I think needs to get addressed as quickly as possible, frankly. But in combat, you'll be issuing all these commands, which can be queued up when you are paused and have a tactical overview of the battlefield. Now on the enemy side of things, while they'll do much the same, you have to be mindful of their physical or magical armor, which seems to, of course, block incoming damage to their actual health in a sort of system that is very similar to, say, Divinity Original Sin 2, which is itself a system that not everybody was wild about, so I'm curious to see their reaction to it or any changes that wind up happening to it over the course of this game's early access period, because while I don't mind that system personally, I know it's not everybody's favorite. Although I will say here it doesn't really seem to block things like status effects the way it does in that game. Now that said, combat is far from your only option. You can also utilize stealth and other talents to interact with the world. So those talents that you can pick up give you the opportunity to do things like pick locks, fix objects in the environment, or even interact with it via tools and stuff if you don't have the requisite skill. So for instance, I encountered a lever at one point that If I had the mechanics to fix, I could just fix it, but I could also potentially bring a vat of oil there to get rid of the rust and throw the lever that way, as a simple example. Now other stuff comes up such as diplomacy, etc., so there are seemingly a lot of different ways to approach situations and quests even. A couple of quests just right in the prologue actually had multiple options to be completed, which is pretty standard for spiders, I would say, so they do seem to be making an attempt to really flesh out those aspects of the game. Now, the game itself does seem to also be utilizing its original region map system, where each area was effectively one large explorable region that you will then travel to and between, gathering up resources, fighting enemies, etc. as you go, which is a solid foundation, which means in terms of right now, I would say that Greedfall 2 is definitely going to deal with issues with people reacting differently to its combat system. Some people are going to love this, some people are going to hate it, especially because it was a change from that original title, but it's definitely rough around the edges right now either way, with some systems and things needing to be cleaned up, animations, etc. Which leads me to the other part of this. At its early access launch, perhaps unsurprisingly, the game is in a pretty rough state. Not least of all just because you have to get it running, which involved a ton of crashes for me, and then of course everything that is quite literally unfinished. So as of right now, with basically every early access title, I would obviously say that only buy this if you are genuinely interested in helping shape some of that development time, in the sense of providing feedback and pointing things out. If that doesn't sound like something you would want to do, then naturally I would just continue to wait as this game makes its journey through early access, at which point you'll get a properly finished product at the end of it, hopefully. Especially since, as of right now, this game appears to be $40 US, though they have made it clear on their Steam page that that price will apparently be going up with the full launch at some point. But with all of that said, I would say that gives a pretty decent first look at Greedfall 2 and its gameplay, and at least as of right now, I would say it feels like a very janky AA RPG, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for me, but it clearly needs a little more time in the oven. But that is pretty much going to do it for this particular video. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing